Christian, author of the literary work The Second Son, award-winning journalist, photographer, living and writing with Tourette's. None other than Mr. Kristof Morrow.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me. You're very kind.
Welcome, yeah, welcome, Mr. Kristof on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Well, you mentioned a lot that's relevant, I guess, to my resume, which is important for people to
Mm-hmm.
know. Shakespeare. Shakespeare. I'm from the South. I grew up in the South, and I have a kind of a Southern heritage. I live in South Carolina now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm originally from Texas, though. Shakespeare. That's where I did my work as a reporter. Shakespeare.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Kristof. Thank you. You've said that after leaving the Navy, you realized university education would not inform my work in any readily than being self-taught. Despite the winning top awards for short fiction and poetry of the two different colleges, what did self-teaching give you the formal education could not? And what do you feel you might have missed by not following the traditional path?
Well, I don't know of a great writer that was ever truly formally educated in the craft. The ones that are truly like uh, timeless, Dickens and Hemingway and Steinbeck and Mark Twain and so on. They had some training uh, in working in journalism, similarly to me, uh, but they had already developed those skills and already had qualified themselves in the industry in that sense as writers. Shakespeare. That's a tick actually. When I say Shakespeare, that's a tick from Tourette's for the people that don't know.
Hmm.
Um, Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Sure.
Shakespeare. I was going to say it's uh I don't mean to go off topic, but it is interesting that Tourette's is in the news recently uh and I'm glad for the awareness. Shakespeare. But anyway, I think that a formal education does well to expose you to a bunch of great writers and kind of offer you uh direction in your style maybe. But the
Hmm.
thing is that like you're going off someone else's sort of syllabus. And to me that means a kind of it doesn't feel as organic to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just doesn't feel like I don't think great writing can be taught. I think you have to I think it has to be within you, those skills already to to be able to execute them at that level.
Mr. Christoph, your first book, The Second Son, and later retitled The Second Son, was published in February 2022. After a 5 year period where your Tourette symptoms made writing impossible, when you finally sat down to write on October 16, 2021, what did the first session feel like? When you are
Mm,
terrified the words would come, or did they pour out because they have been dumped up for so long?
yeah, I think the latter. I think that I had not written in so long. I wanted to do something to stretch, to exercise my creativity, um, in a way that was finally productive. Shakespeare, and I Shakespeare. My first session was extraordinary. I wrote a poem that I'm quite proud of. That didn't. It's the only thing in the book that wasn't rewritten at all. Uh, Everything else in the book was revised very heavily, and the content didn't change. Its presentation did, though, dramatically. Uh, so I think that Tourette's held me back for a long time, but ultimately I prevailed. I feel like. Mm.
Hmm. Interesting, Mr. Kristof. You said on your first day of writing, the second son you wrote about 500 words. That's an extraordinary output. Is that typical for you? Do you write the bursts of inspiration, or have you developed a disciplined daily practice despite because of unpredict- unpredictably of Tourette's?
Shit. Um, maybe there's a typo in my profile. I actually wrote 5,000 words the first day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Shakespeare. Five. I write about 1,000 words a day now,
Mm-hmm.
and that's very consistent and very easy to manage and maintain. Um, it allows you to express something fully, a thought fully, or a scene fully, or at least most of a scene anyway. Um, and that way you're not coming back into a scene. So like I don't know, perhaps in my books I haven't examined this at all, but maybe every 1,000 words or every 1,500 words there's a noticeable scene change. I don't know. But the work, yeah, the work has to be done every day, so I do it every day.
In several interviews, Mr. Christoph, you've discussed the mechanics of your writing process. Sorry for that. And your unique relationship with the words. Can you walk us through the typical writing session? Do you outline extensively, or do you discover the story as you write?
I discover it as I write, just like the reader would. I think that it's important to allow yourself to be immersed in your own the world that you've created, because uh, you can make observations. Like there's, for example, this is going to sound silly, but if you've ever seen The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, there's a point
Yes.
in the movie where uh, Neo wakes up for the first time in his real body, and uh, he's talking to Morpheus, the guy who freed him from this computer slumber thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And he says, "Because you've never used them before." That's a writer that's paying attention to their world, truly paying attention to what's going on in their world. They talked about the muscles being atrophied. Of course, some of these things are going to be obvious, but when he says that about his eyes, why do my eyes hurt? I just thought that that was a fantastic moment. Uh, Shakespeare. I thought it did uh, well to describe what's necessary if you want to write a scene and you want it to be you want to study it. You want it to be studied, and you want to study it yourself. Study the surroundings that your characters have to live in. Yeah, so you can develop something like that. You can have these moments where these revelations where you're like, oh, of course, you know, and those are very satisfying moments.
Very well said, Mr. Christoph. You mentioned strategies for tackling writer's block. What's your most effective tactic when the words can't won't come and has changed since your symptoms resurface?
Shakespeare. I don't I don't really struggle with writer's block a whole lot. Um, I know that that's not typical, but what I do is, if I'm struggling with something, I talk about it aloud with someone, and I say like, this is what's going on in my story, and this is where the story needs to go. What's going to happen in between? What compelling moment, figure, person, thing is going to happen? And eventually, within 15 or 20 minutes of having this discussion, it occurs to me. I have a, a moment of clarity, and I realize that I can, I know what's going to happen next, and I sit down and do the work. Shakespeare.
Interesting, Mr.
You're mute.
Christoph. You describe your writing style as influenced by Charles Dickens, but you aim for clarity and accessibility. How do you balance literary ambition with the need of understood, do you ever catch yourself writing something beautiful but impenetrable or impenetrable, and how do you edit that impulse?
Hmm, that is a brilliant question.
Thank you.
um, Shakespeare. Uh, Literary ambition is so interesting to think about. Success, literary success, and wanting to be regarded well by your peers, especially, um, is I think so critical to a writer's self worth if they have that ambition. Shakespeare. How do I balance it though? I often take moments. I use it's punctuated. I don't write intensely the whole time. With such impenetrable prose. Um, and I think that if you're a good enough writer, the writing is never impenetrable. Um, I think that it's incredible that to be able to balance the two. But for me, I don't. I wish I wish I knew. It's not as difficult as it seems. Uh, yeah, it's hard to explain. I wish I wish I had a better answer for that because I don't. I don't know. I just sometimes there's moments where you have to become that, and you have to become the writer that feels like faintly impenetrable. Um, I have a moment where a character dies and it says, "Here the soldier most aloof and unknown to them, he in serial conflict with his nature, and who baffled all with the riddle of his persistence, with the riddle of his persistence, was lost forever to winter's mortal arrest, drowned in a grave of eternal dread." Uh, it's uh, rival in his fashion to angels expelled from grace. That's a moment that you can, when a character is dying, where you take that ambition and you let it live freely. Shakespeare. The literary ambition is a necessary component, but it's an animal. Uh, it's a beast, and you have to make sure that it doesn't lose track of where it's supposed to go.
Mhm.
Shakespeare.
Very well said, Mr. Kristof. You've said your love for creativity was shaped by video games and books, eventually leading you to discover writing as therapeutic escape. What was the book or game that first made you think, I want to do that? I want to build worlds like this?
That's a beautiful question. Um, I think that there's a couple answers to that, of course. Um, Number one would be Final Fantasy X. Um, Incredible story. Uh, I was a little kid when I finally I got through the whole story, and I got to the end, and the end, happens, and I was just so moved by the ending. Um, it inspired me a great deal. Uh, and I think that John Steinbeck's East of Eden would be my other answer. Um, I realized that I wanted to describe sufficiently and wholly and completely the notion of generational trauma, or the notion of generations themselves, like a book that spans through several generations, where you see the consequences from actions that happen in the first part of the book, and you realize how it affects their grandchildren in the end. It's extraordinary. Um, it's an extraordinary work. If you haven't read it, I would suggest that uh, you do that. I'm looking at my library. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that's there's so many books. There's so many books and so many video games that have uh, contributed to this uh, lexicon or this the library in my head of content. Uh, Not to be inspired by directly, uh, because that would be like stealing. Uh, I would think. I think it's more like the standard is set, so you know how good you want it to be. You want it to be at this level and achieve that.
Beautifully articulated, Mr. Kristof. Your debut novel tackles themes of climate change, empire, rebellion, and interconnectedness through the unique monster concept. How do you translate complex, often overwhelming real world issue into fantasy without becoming preachy or didactic?
Um. Okay, that's a great question too. Shakespeare. I love that. I love that question actually. It's through the characters themselves. That has to be achieved completely through the character's perspective. Um, there's no other way about it. There's moments where you can borrow from reality uh, in ways that uh, are profound and moving, um, but without the characters living these events that you're writing about in the book, you it's all meaningless. If you've ever seen the movie, if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, there's that massive planet that has the waves that are 400 or 500 or 1,000 feet tall, and they're traveling over the planet, just eventually crushing everything beneath it. These massive waves caused by a giant black hole. Uh, and this environment is meaningless to us outside of a fast, maybe a a curiosity or a fascination. It would be a brittle one. It would be a, a very brief one. If not for the character who dies on that planet, then it suddenly you realize like, oh, human lives are at stake, and now it matters what the conditions of this planet are, because it will directly impact the characters that we've come to know and appreciate, or to connect with. Yeah. So yeah, it's through the characters.
Through the characters, indeed. You discuss how childhood traumas being on autism spectrum have enriched your
Mhm.
narratives, helping you frame complex characters and craft profound stories. How does happen in practice? Do you find yourself giving characters piece of your own experience, or does the trauma create a kind of emotional radar that helps you see other more clearly?
Hmm. I love all your questions. You're so good at
Thank you. Thank you.
this. Shakespeare. Um, hmm. I think that every character is informed by my experience or by the experience of someone close to me. But generally, they are a fractured or incomplete version of myself that I fill in the space for. I offer them, if you can imagine a mirror being shattered, and then each character giving a piece of that, I give them, they take the piece from me, and you put it back in the mirror, and then you create a whole new mirror around it, so that it reflects them, but still has the piece of me in it. That's what I do. I try to uh, create a whole character around a single, or a set of traits, or a set of experiences that created who they are. Um, I have a character who uh, named Sergius, for example, who lived out in the countryside, but he's an old man now, and he lived with his mother, and he wanted to live in the city. So when his father died, he sold the farm so that he and his mother could live in the city. And he loves books, so he goes and has this extraordinary library of books that he's very proud of. But then his neighbors find out about the books. Now, books back in the time period that I'm writing with, they're quite valuable. Books are incredibly valuable, and so someone came in, robbed the place, and actually killed the mother in the process of doing the robbery. And then he comes home and discovers all this. Now, this one experience uh, is informed by several things. Um, Everything that he wanted before, and everything that he would want after this event, and then you bring the two together and you marry them in a way that makes sense. Uh, it's a lot simpler than it seems for a lot of people. They struggle to create characters that are compelling and or relatable. Um, but it's just about understanding how someone would respond to a situation. Yeah, it's really simple. I love it though. Mm.
Interesting, Mr. Kristof. You've spoken extensively about the influence of AI on the writing process and the limitations of AI in creative work. In an episode recorded in March 2025, you noted that AI generated content often lacks of nuance of human creativity. Have you experimented with AI as a tool? So where do you see the line between helpful assistant and creative hollowing out?
Hmm. I think that AI cannot really helpfully communicate the human experience in many ways. Like it can examine it and it can imitate it. Um, but ultimately, there's going to be a sort of um, misalignment with the words themselves. They'll be used in a way that's not appropriate. It doesn't make sense. Like uh, they have different connotations. Uh, they have different energies. We're talking about all kinds of. I mean, everything. The dictionary. Just look at the dictionary. They use words that don't really make sense sometimes. That I mean, it might like actually it might actually just make sense, right? But it doesn't. Um, the, Here's what it is. Humans are imperfect, and they write imperfect material. AI is going to get it right. They're going to perfectly stick to this kind of prompt. They'll stick to the prompt of what you're asking it to do. They will, but a human will stray from this and create something by accident that's extraordinary and beautiful. So often, like we credit I heard AI say something that sounds profound, but um, it said that I am the AI said that I am what happens when you try to carve God out of the wood of your own hunger, which I thought was quite interesting. And I heard a comedian say that it sounded biblical. Uh, Josh Johnson, I think, actually, at a stand-up show the day that it happened. And everyone was quite moved by that quote. Uh, the trouble is when you examine the phrase itself, uh, it's a little too perfect. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to explain. Um, it's Yeah, I don't know. Shakespeare.
Very well said, Mr. Kristof. You went viral on TikTok in June in recent years, selling over 1,300 copies of your debut book and gaining readers in over 50 countries. You've described the experience as an emotional roller coaster and hug from the world. How does this sudden validation affect your writing process? Did liberate you, or did it create new pressure for the next book?
Hmm. I think that it had a temporary effect um, on my. I don't remember it having an effect on my process actually.
Hmm.
Uh, I just did the work. I continued to do the work because writing is it exists outside of me, um, while simultaneously like controlling everything I do. And it directs how I process the world around me. Uh, so going viral itself, I think was helpful in it was affirming, uh, and it did a lot uh, to offer me a kind of constituency. Like I had people now that wanted to read my book, and before that, I had no one. I had written the book, published the book, I had sold nothing from it, and I was like Herman Melville with less than 50 copies sold. I think by the time I went viral, Shakespeare. But mm, mm, Shakespeare, yeah,
So,
just
Mr. Christoph, your book is now recommended reading in university classes studying literature. What does that mean to you, especially given your complicated relationship with the formal education? Do you ever think about students reading your work in a classroom and they might be taking away from it?
huh. Well, I don't uh, dispute nor discourage anyone from studying literature, which I think is different from taking a creative writing course. Uh, I think I just think that to be truly great in the craft, like you have to already have a vision for what you want to come to pass from it, and uh, you have to have an intimate and special and singular relationship with words that that transcends how we understand them, and how we use them. And I'm Shakespeare, uh, and I say all this, uh, but of course, like I've I know someone named the Pulitzer Prize winning writer Robert Olin Butler. He he teaches at he used to teach anyway at Florida State University creative writing, and he's a very talented writer. Um, I'm curious to know what his thoughts on that would be. Uh, but as far as like my work being studied and what they would take away from it, I hope that they would take away a greater understanding. Like my whole mission as a writer, like Steinbeck said, actually, my whole mission as a writer is to help people understand one another, and I live by that completely. I also want to entertain. I want my stories to be adventures, relatable adventures, and sometimes, very occasionally, there's magic, and I want to remind people of that.
Very well said and beautifully articulated, Mr. Christoph. And to wrap up our discussion for today, you've described creativity as most essential part of a human existence. You've written through trauma, through Tourette's, through silence and through viral success. If you could whisper one sentence into the ear of every writer listening right now who's struggling to begin, struggling to continue, or struggling to believe their voice matters, what would you want them to hear?
Um, Stop trying to be perfect on the first pass, and don't. If you want to write a book, don't write prose the first draft. Just write action and dialogue, and that's it. And move through the book. Scene descriptions, that's fine, but don't try to write something beautiful. Try to write something that can stand on its own foundationally, so that you can then make it beautiful.
Indeed, to make it beautiful and share to the world. People, so Mr. Kristof, can you please invite the listeners to support your books, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Oh, well, it's Shakespeare. Everything is on KristofMorrow.com. I'm on
Mm.
TikTok, and that's the platform that I use to talk about my work and stuff. Shakespeare. Yeah.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Kristof Morrow because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Kristof, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.